I wasn't supposed to be home that afternoon. It had been one of those typical Thursday mornings, back-to-back meetings, a calendar that looked more like a game of Tetris than a work schedule. But just before noon, my biggest client called to reschedule. That gave me a 2-hour window, not enough to dive into anything meaningful at work, but just enough time to drive home, eat something better than gas station coffee, and maybe catch 10 minutes of peace. I didn't text Allison to say I was coming. There was no reason to. I figured she might be out. She often worked out around midday or ran errands. It was just supposed to be a quiet moment, a harmless detour. Funny how the smallest decisions, the ones that seem like nothing at the time, can crack open everything. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Not suspiciously so, just normal. The dog didn't even bark, which was odd, but I figured he was asleep upstairs. I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door and walked toward the kitchen. That's when I saw them, the flowers. They were on the entryway table. Fresh. Elegant. Way more expensive looking than the cheap bouquets I sometimes brought home on Fridays. Orchids and lilies, carefully arranged, wrapped in twine and placed in a glass vase. No plastic wrapping. No store label. Just clean and deliberate. There was a card, but it was turned upside down and blank on the outside. No name, no scribbled heart. That in itself didn't scream infidelity. Not yet. But it was odd. The kind of odd that tugs at your gut before your brain can justify it. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she picked them up herself. Maybe her mom sent them. Maybe she got them for a friend and hadn't delivered them yet. But my stomach was already in knots and I didn't know why. I walked into the living room. That's when the air changed. Her phone was on the couch. Now, Allison never left her phone unattended, not unlocked anyway. It was always on her or in her purse. Even in the shower, it was on the counter with the screen facing down. This time, it was sitting on the armrest, screen still lit up as if she'd just put it down a second earlier. It was open to her photo gallery. And what stared back at me made my heart skip. A mirror selfie. She was standing in our upstairs bathroom. I recognized the marble counter, the silver soap dish we picked out last fall. But I didn't recognize what she was wearing. Black lace lingerie. Delicate. Revealing. Not something I'd ever seen before. Not once in the 6 years we'd lived together. She looked good. Beautiful even. But not for me. That was the thought I couldn't shake. Beneath the photo was a caption in the corner. Subtle, but it was there, that iPhone feature that lets you add text. Bet this'll keep you thinking of me tonight, face-blowing kiss. I froze. My brain stalled out like an old engine in the cold. I wasn't looking for this. I hadn't even touched the phone. It was just there, staring back at me. And suddenly, everything else in the room, the pillows, the sunlight, the half-drunk glass of orange juice on the table, all of it faded into a kind of dull, echoing silence. I didn't touch anything. I didn't swipe. I didn't want more. I already had enough. And then, like a scene written by someone else, I heard the familiar creak of the upstairs hallway floorboards. Her footsteps. Casual, light. She had no idea I was here. She appeared on the stairs a moment later, barefoot, still in leggings and an oversized hoodie. Her hair was up, twisted into one of those effortless buns she wore on Sundays when she didn't want to be seen but still wanted to look good. She stopped halfway down when she saw me, or rather, saw the phone in my hand. I hadn't even realized I was holding it. She didn't panic. That's the thing I keep replaying. She didn't flinch or gasp or reach out to grab it. Her expression barely shifted. She just tilted her head slightly like she was sizing up the moment, calculating what story to tell. "Oh," she said lightly, and then she gave a short laugh, casual, dismissive, like I'd found an old Halloween costume photo or some forgotten memory. "That? It's a joke. Rachel dared me to send that to her boyfriend. You know how we mess with him. It's a long-running thing." A pause. Then a smile. "I know how it looks. But it's not what you think. Not what I think. God. That phrase should be retired from the English language." She walked the rest of the way down the stairs and grabbed the phone from my hand like she was brushing lint off my shoulder. No tension. No shame. Just a controlled pivot back into comfort. "Seriously," she added, flipping the phone screen off. "We were joking around. I didn't mean for you to see that. Didn't mean for me to see it. Not, I'm sorry. Not, that was inappropriate. Just, I didn't mean for you to see it, like the violation was my awareness, not her behavior. I didn't say anything. Not then." My brain was still playing catch-up. My heart was trying to convince me that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't what it looked like. But I knew better. I knew her too well. I knew how she deflected. How she'd learned to say just enough, never more, and pivot from confrontation like it was a dance she'd practiced. We sat in silence for a beat too long. She changed the subject. asked if I wanted coffee, mentioned a package that had come for me, moved through the room like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been gut-punched by a moment that didn't fit in our marriage. I told myself to stay calm, told myself not to jump to conclusions. But inside, something had already snapped. It was small, quiet, like the first splinter in a windshield after a pebble hits it on the highway. Invisible at first glance. But you feel it. You know it's there. And you know it's only going to spread. For the rest of that afternoon, we acted normal. She joked about a neighbor's weird new haircut. I nodded along. She made lunch. Ate. We didn't mention the photo again. It was buried under a blanket of normalcy, covered up like something fragile we both agreed not to touch. But I didn't forget. And that night, as we sat across from each other on the couch watching a show I couldn't follow, her laughter felt like static. I watched the way she scrolled through her phone during commercials, the way her eyes darted across the screen like she was chasing something just beyond reach. The photo played in my head like a broken record. I tried to tell myself it didn't mean what I thought it did. But I'm not stupid. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew the truth. The thing they never tell you about doubt is how patient it is. It doesn't kick down the door or scream its presence. It lingers, quiet, creeping. It waits until the world slows down, until you're brushing your teeth or folding laundry or sitting in traffic. Then it slips in, gentle as breath, and whispers you saw it, you know. And I did. In the days that followed, my brain became a projector, playing back old footage with a new lens. Couldn't help it. Everything I'd ignored or brushed aside came roaring back with a clarity I wished I didn't have. I remembered that Friday night 3 months ago. She'd said she was going to a girls' dinner, just her and Rachel. But she'd come home nearly 2 hours later than she said she would. No text, no call. Just walked in like she hadn't noticed the time. Her makeup was a little too perfect for just dinner. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I remembered asking how it went. She said, "It was fine," and immediately changed the subject. I hadn't thought much of it then. But now it felt like a page ripped from a script she'd rehearsed. Then there was that work event I'd offered to attend with her. She told me it was just a boring seminar, not worth the drive, and suggested I stay home. I remember her saying, "You'd be bored out of your mind," which I'd believed at the time. But afterward, she never mentioned it again. No stories, no follow-up, just a vague, "It was long." And that was it. Even smaller things stood out now, like how she used to leave her phone on the counter while she cooked. Screen up, music playing, notifications buzzing like bees. Now it was always face down, on silent, always with her, even to the bathroom. Or how she used to text me random things during the day. Photos of her lunch, memes, the occasional thinking about you. Lately, the messages had been shorter, sparse. Sometimes just a thumbs up or a K, and then stretches of nothing. At night, in bed, I'd turn toward her and she'd shift slightly away. Not dramatically, not enough to seem cold, but just enough that our shoulders didn't touch. Just enough that her warmth never reached me. One night, I caught her smiling at her phone. Not a polite chuckle or a quick smirk, but a slow, drawn-out smile. The kind you give someone who knows you well. When she noticed me watching, she locked the screen without a word. "I was just looking at a meme," she said. I nodded, said nothing, but a piece of me chipped off right then. And that wasn't even the worst of it. There was a Saturday a while back when I borrowed her car to run errands. On the passenger seat was a second water bottle. I almost didn't notice it. Just a plain, reusable bottle. Not hers. Different brand. Slightly scuffed. It smelled faintly like aftershave when I opened it. For some reason I can't explain. I didn't ask about it. I didn't want to seem paranoid. But now I wondered if it was someone else's. And the gym bag. That one stuck with me. She'd started going to a new gym a few months back. Said it was better for her schedule. No problem, I was happy she was staying active. But one day I spotted a new padlock on her duffel. I joked, "What, you got state secrets in there?" She smiled and said, "Just keeping the shampoo thieves out." I laughed with her. But now I wondered, why lock a gym bag that never left the trunk? These thoughts followed me everywhere. At work, I stared at spreadsheets without absorbing a single number. On my commute, music played, but I couldn't hear it. Every quiet moment turned into a courtroom, and my memories were witnesses I couldn't cross-examine. And through it all, I told myself maybe I was being unfair. Maybe it really had been a joke between her and Rachel. Maybe I was blowing this out of proportion. But the more I remembered, the more it felt like I'd been walking through fog for months and someone had just flipped on a floodlight. Dinner became a silent ritual. We sat at the same table, ate the same meals, but the conversations felt manufactured. She asked about work. I asked about her day. We smiled. We nodded. We didn't talk. One night, I brought up the flowers. Those orchids in the hallway, who were they from? She didn't blink. Rachel, actually. She dropped them off when you were out. For helping her with her resume. That didn't add up. Rachel worked in marketing. I hadn't touched a resume in years. Oh, I said. That was generous. She smiled. Yeah, she's been going through a lot. And that was the end of it. No follow-up. No elaboration. Like she was daring me to dig further. I didn't. I couldn't. Because if I pushed and I was right, then I'd be the guy who stood still while his world fell apart. Instead, I became the guy who quietly unraveled. At night, I stayed up late scrolling my own thoughts. I'd lie in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how we got here. When did we stop laughing? When did she stop looking at me the way she used to? Was it my fault? Had I been too focused on work? Too emotionally absent? Had she reached for someone else because I hadn't been enough? That question hurt the most. Had I not been enough? I looked at her differently now. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't unsee the cracks. Every smile felt measured. Every laugh had an echo of effort. I'd catch myself analyzing the way she touched me. Was it reflex or affection? Her kisses felt like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence she didn't want to write anymore. One morning, she left early for a strategy meeting across town. As soon as the door closed behind her, I walked upstairs and stared at the bathroom mirror. I didn't recognize the man looking back. Tired eyes? Jaw clenched? A furrow that had become permanent. Was this who I'd become? The guy who second-guessed everything? Who tiptoed through his own house, afraid of answers? I went into the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed. That's where I found her old phone charger tucked behind the nightstand. She hadn't used that room in months. Why was the charger there? That's the thing with suspicion, it doesn't let go. Once it's in your bloodstream, it makes every detail feel like evidence. And yet, I hadn't asked her directly. I hadn't said, who was the photo for, or why did you lie about the flowers? I was playing chess against myself, waiting for her to make the next move. Maybe I was afraid of confirming what I already knew. Or maybe I was still hoping I was wrong. But deep down, I felt it. This wasn't just about one photo. It wasn't just about a caption or a forgotten charger or a muted laugh. It was the accumulation. The 1,000 tiny moments of absence. The 1,000 little lies so small they didn't feel like lies at the time. The kind of betrayal that doesn't slap you in the face but erodes you from the inside, one doubt at a time. And maybe the worst part? I still loved her. God help me, I still loved her. Which made the slow decay feel even more like a trap. Because every time I thought about leaving, I remembered the woman she used to be. The warmth we used to share. The life we built. The promises. The quiet understanding. The laughter under blankets, the trips to nowhere, the way she used to trace circles on my hand when she thought I was asleep. But that woman wasn't here anymore. At least, not in the way she used to be. And if she was hiding something, if I wasn't wrong, then soon, something would have to give. I just didn't know when. Or how much it would cost me. There's a difference between doubt and certainty. Doubt is slippery. It gives you just enough room to hope. To negotiate with yourself. It keeps you pacing the floor at night, asking the same questions over and over because there's still a chance, however small, that you're wrong. That you're paranoid. That you're making a mountain out of miscommunication and overthinking. But certainty? Certainty is quiet. Cold. It doesn't argue or ask for more time. It doesn't come with dramatic music or flashing red lights. It just walks in, sets down the facts like an uninvited guest, and makes itself at home in your chest. That's what happened the morning I came home from training early. I usually stayed after class to stretch, maybe chat with a couple guys from the gym. But that day I was off. I had a headache, a strange heaviness in my limbs, and something pulling at the base of my neck like an invisible hook telling me to go home. I almost ignored it. But I didn't. I got in my car and drove home in silence. No music. No calls. Just the hum of the road and a growing weight in my gut. When I walked through the front door, the house was too still. Not silent, still. Like it was holding its breath. Her car was in the driveway. But the dog wasn't barking. The kitchen was empty. The TV off. It wasn't panic that hit me first, it was instinct. A bone-deep sense that something was wrong. I walked upstairs. And immediately, I knew. The scent hit me before I reached the bedroom. Not overpowering, just subtle. Like a whisper of cologne that didn't belong to me. Earthy, sharp, with a touch of sweetness. I didn't recognize the brand, but I knew it wasn't mine. The bedroom door was open. The bed looked disturbed. Sheets askew. Pillows shifted. Not in the chaotic way we sometimes left it on rushed mornings. This was different. Neater in some spots. Wrinkled in others. The kind of messy that comes from someone trying to fix it quickly but not caring enough to get it right. There was a second toothbrush on the bathroom counter. Blue handle. Not mine. Sitting beside her rose gold one like it belonged there. I stared at it for a long time. I don't know why. Maybe because it was such a stupid, mundane object. A toothbrush. But that's what made it real. That was the proof. Not dramatic. Not scandalous. Just domestic. He had been here. He had brushed his teeth here. And I had slept in this bed after him. I walked back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress. The covers were still warm. The smell still lingered. Something in me shattered, not loud, not violent, but final. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, staring at the creases in the sheets, trying to understand how I had let it come to this. How long had I been living in someone else's shadow? How many mornings had I kissed her goodbye while she was thinking of someone else? I heard the garage door open. My heart didn't race. It just stopped. Like it was waiting to hear the lie she'd choose. Her voice came through the hallway seconds later. Babe? I didn't answer. She rounded the corner, keys in hand, and stopped when she saw me. I saw the shift in her expression. A flicker of fear. Or maybe just recognition. That the game was over. Hey, she said carefully. Everything okay? I didn't speak. I just looked at her. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just hollow. And maybe that's what scared her most. She followed my gaze to the bed. Her eyes flicked to the toothbrush. Then back to me. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She knew. I knew. There was nothing left to explain. Richard, she started. Don't, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. She took a step forward. I can explain. That made me laugh. Actually laugh. A short, broken thing that caught in my throat. Can you? I asked. Because I'd love to hear how this, I gestured to the room, isn't what it looks like. She didn't respond. I stood up. My legs were stiff, my body numb. I walked past her, down the hallway, down the stairs, and into the kitchen. She followed. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said behind me. Her voice cracked, but I didn't turn around. I poured a glass of water. My hand trembled slightly, and I hated that she could see it. How long? I asked. Silence. How long? She hesitated. A few weeks. I turned then. Don't lie. Another pause. She lowered her gaze. A couple of months. My throat tightened. I nodded slowly. She started crying. It was one night at first. I didn't plan it. It just happened. Right, I said. Because people accidentally end up in each other's beds. Please, just listen. I cut in. I listened when you said Rachel sent the flowers. When you said the photo was a joke. When you said you were working late. I listened, Allison. And every single time I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Tears streamed down her face now. I didn't want to hurt you. Then why did you? I asked. She didn't have an answer. And I didn't need one anymore. Because here's the thing, heartbreak doesn't always come from the act itself. It comes from the realization that someone looked at you, looked at the life you built together, and still decided it wasn't enough. That you weren't enough. And maybe I wasn't. But I deserved better than this. You don't have to leave right now, I said quietly. But it's done. She collapsed onto the stool, sobbing. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. My body was already leaving before my mind caught up. I walked out to the backyard. The sky was cloudy. Gray. Still. And for the first time in a long time I felt something close to peace. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I finally knew. There would be no more wondering. No more hoping. Just facts. Cold. Clean. Final. She had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. I lay on top of the sheets, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling in our bedroom, her bedroom now, I guess, while the clock on the nightstand whispered seconds into hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the toothbrush. The bed. The face she made when she realized I knew. Around 2:30 a.m. I went downstairs. Sat at the kitchen table in the dark with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood around me. Funny how the silence of a home can turn hostile once you know you're not really welcome in it anymore. There was a notepad on the counter, one we used to write grocery lists or reminders. I flipped to a fresh page. List, things I'm taking. I wasn't angry when I wrote it. I wasn't vengeful. I wasn't trying to make a point. I just needed something to anchor me while the foundation of my life disintegrated beneath my feet. Item 1. Dad's watch. It was the only thing of real sentimental value I owned. A simple leather-band fossil, probably worth less than a dinner out. But it was his. He wore it until the day he couldn't anymore. I wore it the morning of my wedding, tucked under my sleeve. Item 2. My notebooks. Journals, really, half-thoughts, sketches, travel plans that never happened. They weren't important to anyone but me. Pages that had held my mind when I couldn't hold it myself. Item 3. 2 boxes of books. Favorites only. I wouldn't take them all. Just the ones that had kept me company when she couldn't or wouldn't. Item 4. Documents. Birth certificate, passport, titles, the things you don't realize are crucial until they're not where they should be. That was it. I stared at the list for a long time. Not because I thought I'd forgotten something, but because I hadn't. The rest? I didn't want it. Not the gifts. Not the photos. Not the couch we spent months arguing about in the store because I thought gray was too cold and she thought beige was too boring. None of it mattered anymore. I took a breath, the kind that's half exhale, half surrender, and added one more note at the bottom. Leave before sunrise. That became my plan. At 4 a.m. I stood outside the bedroom door. I didn't knock. I didn't speak. I just waited quietly in case the sound of my presence would stir something in her, some echo of us, but it didn't. I opened the door just wide enough to peek inside. She was asleep. Or pretending to be. Blanket up to her chin. Breathing shallow. Face turned to the wall. I wondered what it felt like for her to be on that side of the bed with her back to the truth. I didn't say goodbye. What was the point? Instead, I moved through the house with quiet precision, collecting only what was on the list. I packed my things into the trunk of my car like I was leaving for a long business trip, neat, organized, emotionless. By 5:12 a.m., I was sitting in the driver's seat with my keys in hand, the front porch light casting a faint glow across the dashboard. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I might hesitate. And hesitation is how people end up staying in places they were never meant to be in the first place. The drive out of town was surreal. Everything was still. Empty streets, blinking traffic lights, a sky caught somewhere between night and morning. I didn't have a destination in mind, at least not one I'd said out loud. But 2 days earlier, before all this had detonated, I'd seen a cabin listed online. Quiet. Remote. Small enough to make sense, big enough not to feel like a punishment. I booked it in the middle of the night after I saw the toothbrush without even realizing what I was doing. It was by a lake. Someplace cool. Mountain air, creaky steps. A town small enough that no one would know my name or hers or ask why I walked like a man who just left his life behind in a plastic tub in the back of a hatchback. When I got there, the owner handed me the keys and said, "You look like you need the quiet." I just nodded. I didn't say much those first few days. I unpacked the books. Lined them up on the windowsill. Set my notebooks on the little table by the corner armchair. Made coffee in silence, sipping it while watching the water ripple against the shore like it knew something I didn't. I didn't hang any clothes. Just left them folded in the suitcase like I was only staying until the storm passed. But the storm wasn't coming. It had already hit. I was standing in its aftermath, learning how to breathe without debris in my throat. The cabin didn't smell like her perfume. There were no shared toothbrushes. No lingering notes on the fridge. No framed photos of smiles that felt like lies in hindsight. There was only what I brought. And somehow that was enough. I started waking up early. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see the sun rise. There was something about watching the light slowly pull itself over the edge of the lake that made me feel small in the best way. Like the world was reminding me that no matter how loud my grief got, the day would begin anyway. I wasn't healed. I wasn't free. Not yet. But I was still standing. I made dinner with ingredients from a local farmer's market. Learned how to cook meals without measuring everything twice. I started walking barefoot on the dock in the mornings. Cold planks. Coffee in hand. Silence all around. I read old letters I'd written but never sent. I let myself cry once, but only once. It wasn't a breakdown. Just a quiet moment. A release. That night, I burned one of the only photos I had left of us. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I needed to watch something disappear on purpose for once, to be the one who let go. I whispered something to the flames. I don't remember what. And then I sat back and let the ashes scatter into the wind. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit until then. Her one night had already happened. And now it was my turn to have a one night of my own. Not with someone else. Not to even the score. But a night that marked something new. A turning point. The moment I stopped trying to be enough for someone who had already decided I wasn't. That morning, I woke up before the sun, poured myself a black cup of coffee, and wrote on the last page of my oldest journal. I didn't lose her. I found myself. For the first 2 weeks, there was silence. No calls. No texts. No, where are you, or please come home. Just a void, vacant and humming with everything unsaid. I wondered if she even noticed how empty the house was without me. If she tripped over the absence like I used to trip over her forgotten shoes. If she reached for me in bed out of habit and found only cold sheets. But I didn't dwell on it. I had other things to focus on. The first week was about survival. Making food. Taking walks. Figuring out what time the general store opened. My head still throbbed from everything I'd seen and said and left behind. My heart felt bruised like a muscle I'd overworked for too long. But slowly, breath by breath, hour by hour, the silence became less suffocating. And then something shifted. I stopped checking my phone first thing in the morning. I started running again. Not to chase anything. Not to outrun what happened. But just to feel the ground under my feet, to remind my body it still belonged to me. I changed my haircut. Chopped off the tired look I'd carried for years. The barber didn't say much, just gave me a nod afterward, as if to say, yeah, you're not the same guy who walked in here. I bought a few new shirts from a local shop. Nothing expensive. Just clean, comfortable. Different enough that I didn't feel like a ghost in my own clothes. I replaced the tired sneakers I'd worn into the ground with boots. Good ones. The kind meant for walking trails and climbing hills. I wore them every day until they started to look like they belonged to me. I started fixing things, 2 little pieces of furniture in the cabin. An old chair with a splintered leg. A drawer that stuck every time I opened it. I sanded wood and tightened screws and ran my hands over smooth grain, and for some reason it felt like I was rebuilding myself one joint at a time. I stopped eating processed garbage. Learned how to cook again. Meals with real ingredients. I made mistakes. Burned things. Underseasoned everything at first. But then it clicked and I found something calming in the rhythm of it, chopping, stirring, tasting. Nourishing myself with intention. Mornings became sacred. Coffee on the porch. Fog lifting from the lake. The chill on my skin reminding me I was alive. That's where I was when the first message came. It was short. Hey. Just that. No name. No explanation. But I didn't need one. The number was still burned into my memory like a tattoo I hadn't asked for. I didn't respond. An hour later, another one. Just wanted to see if you're okay. I turned the phone face down on the porch table and didn't look at it again until nightfall. The next morning, there were 3 more. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. Can we talk? But it was too late for that. Because while she had been living her life without me, playing house with lies and distractions, I had been building something better. Not out of revenge. Not out of spite. But because when everything falls apart, you either sit in the rubble or you get up and start sweeping. I chose to sweep. And with every day that passed, I was sweeping further and further away from her. She must have noticed. Her texts got longer. Apologies mixed with explanations. Half-hearted justifications wrapped in emotional appeals. She wanted to talk. She wanted to figure things out. She said, you disappeared without giving me a chance to explain. But what was left to explain? The photo? The flowers? The bed? The toothbrush? She'd had her chance. And what she didn't realize was that leaving wasn't a reaction, it was a decision. Not a punishment, but a boundary. A line drawn quietly in the sand after too many lines had already been crossed. I went 3 more days without replying. Focused on small things. I painted the porch railing. I drove into town and spent an afternoon at the farmer's market, talking to strangers who didn't know my name, didn't care about my past. I bought a plant. A small, hardy one with thick leaves that didn't need much to survive. I placed it by the window. The messages kept coming. I miss you. We can fix this. You said you loved me. Doesn't that mean anything? It did. But loving someone and staying with them aren't always the same thing. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them break you. So I put my energy into something that gave back. I started journaling again. Not about her. About me. Not questions like why did she do it? Or what did I do wrong, but better ones. What do I want now? What kind of life would make me proud to live in? Who am I without the noise? The answers didn't come all at once. But when they did, they came quietly. Gently. Like old friends returning home. I was a man who enjoyed stillness. I was a man who cooked his own meals, who ran before sunrise, who could fix a broken chair. I was a man who had been broken and didn't let that be the end of his story. One morning I caught my reflection in the window and didn't look away. My shoulders were squared. My skin a little more sun-worn. My eyes tired, sure, but honest. Present. Awake. I hadn't seen that man in a long time. And God, I'd missed him. So I started showing up for him. Every day. I set routines, not rigid, but sacred. Coffee before noise. A walk before screens. One thing learned every week. I taught myself how to make sourdough. I started sketching again, just for me. I stopped looking at the door, wondering if someone would walk in. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't stuck in a timeline where she held the pen and I waited for her to write me back in. I had my own story now. And it didn't start with betrayal. It started with me. So when she sent another message that week, longer this time, filled with regret and desperation, I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I didn't rage. I just let it sit there. Unanswered. Because sometimes silence is the clearest answer of all. She had expected me to fall apart. To beg. To yell. To fight for something already broken. But instead, I was waking up at 6 a.m. in a cabin by a lake, frying eggs in a SK*let that hissed with promise, and feeling the weight of her absence become something lighter than I ever imagined. She didn't expect that. She didn't expect the man who left with nothing to become a man who didn't need her permission to heal. But that's exactly who I was becoming. Not bitter.